indication that Prime Minister Modi has arrived. There he is in the car. And we can talk over this with our guest. He is the former ambassador to India, Tim Romer. As we watch these pictures, Ambassador, tell us the significance of this meeting and whether it will be warm or tension-filled or a little of both.
Well, good to be with you, Liz. First of all, this meeting has been talked a lot about in the last couple of days as being one only about chemistry. How will the two of them get along personally? I think it's about much more than that. It is about physics. When big forces come together, how will Mr. Modi reconcile his India first with Mr. Trump's
America first.
America first. Mr. Modi wants to build in India. Mr. Trump wants to protect American jobs. There's a way to do this. There's a way for both sides to talk about a win-win scenario where we manufacture things in America and we sell them to India. It might be defense. It might be a Caterpillar or John Deere equipment to help them with their agriculture. It might be clean liquid gas, natural gas for their economy, so they have a stronger, cleaner economy. But managing these differences and talking about where you have differences. Maybe you have some differences on Afghanistan. Maybe you have some differences on trade. Maybe you have differences on climate change. Maybe our American businesses are having a hard time getting into their market. Managing those differences is every bit as important as finding new areas to deepen this strong relationship. You
mentioned that we could benefit from this by manufacturing items that India buys. Not working that way right now in the way that President Trump and many Americans would like to see it work, meaning we got a $30 billion deficit with them. We're buying all of their products and they're not buying enough of ours.
Well, that's exactly right, Liz. And one of the things we did in the Obama administration is the president really worked hard to try to make sure we were selling them equipment, GE turbines made in South Carolina, C-17s that would help India both with their defense and with their humanitarian assistance after an earthquake or a tsunami, to be a leader in the region to help other countries. Those were made in the USA, great products made by U.S. workers and then sold to India, and it's a win-win scenario for both.
Well, have you seen this Economist, front page of The Economist for the most recent June 24th issue? It says, Modi's India, the illusion of reform. There are believers who say this guy isn't really a reformer. To what do you attribute that? And, Donald Trump sees through some of this, particularly where he felt that India was gaming the Paris Climate Accord and that we'd get the short end of that stick.
Well, I happen to think that whether it's government to government with the United States and India or business to business, our businesses, we have a great opportunity to be able to sell India technology that will help them with a cleaner economy. Natural gas, wind and solar equipment, things we're making here again with hands and brains of Americans that the Indians desperately want to buy those products. So I think even on the climate issue, we have an opportunity to sell them things that will decrease our deficit with them and enhance their security. We also may hear the announcement of $2 billion worth of drones, American drones made in San Diego, California by General Atomics to the Indians. That would help them on counterterrorism. That would help them protect a key asset of the Indian Ocean, something we want to work more and more with them on. That maritime security domain is something that the United States and India can work more on, and that will bother China. And that's a good thing to get China's attention on. We can't have China filling vacuums these days and taking power away from the United States or
We know
India.
they're already moving to do this. And as we finish up, there are two big Indian companies that are publicly traded, Wipro and Infosys. Infosys, I believe, is hitting a new high today, ticker symbol INFY. And those are companies that benefit when they place Indian workers in America through H-1B visas. So what's going to be the tension there?
There's going to be a lot of tension there. I met with Mr. Modi about 2 months ago when I was in India, Liz, and this was the topic that Mr. Modi got the most animated about. He said America needs to be able to continue to invent things in the world, be the leader in the world economy, and therefore they need to be able to bring in Americans in engineering and high-skill background to help create new businesses and new jobs in America. That can be part of it, but we need to make sure we protect our homeland security. We need to make sure that we're bringing in the right people safely.
As we've been mentioning, there has been an arms deal done here, drones and fighter jets from the United States being sold to India. How will these defense deals be seen in China?
I think that China has recognized that India is destined to want to strengthen its military power. And this is not new. If you look at the past decade, for example, between 2012 and 2016, India's arms import accounts for 14% of the global arms import. India has been the largest arms importer for a long time. And, you know, what India has been buying primarily has been buying from Russia. Russia has accounted for nearly 68% of India's arms imports, and the U.S. during the 2012 to 2016 period accounted only for 14% of India's arms imports, Israel accounting for 7%. As India tried to diversify away, not completely away, but diversify more towards its arms purchases from the West, including the U.S., Germany, and France, and I think there exists enormous amount of opportunities for the U.S. military, for the U.S. defense cooperation with India. So, you know, there's nothing China could do to stop India from wanting to purchase arms. You know, at some point, the U.S. will become a major supplier to India. And also India wants to build manufacturing capabilities domestically through these joint ventures. I think that China is tracking the progress closely, but I don't think there's anything that China could do to prevent it.
Right. Selena, what will the impact of this be, the fact that India wants to diversify the sources of its arms and is now looking to the United States?
Yeah, now this is certainly something not new, and certainly that's something that is, you know, long predates this particular visit. You know, for the longest time, India was deeply dependent on the Russians, but for various reasons, partly because the Russians have proved to be quite unreliable, partly because of the closer US-India relationship after the signing of the nuclear deal in 2005. Increasingly, India is turning more and more towards the United States and other smaller arms suppliers such as Israel. Now, I agree largely that this is, you know, that this is not cause for alarm from a Chinese perspective, because if you look at the two countries' defense spending in perspective, even though India is the largest importer, it spends a lot less on defense than China, partly because it's a much smaller economy, but also the import numbers indicate the fact that India really doesn't have a defense production base to speak of its own. And therefore, it's a disproportionate amount of its defense spending on armaments is imports. And I agree completely with Hayan that there is a desire in India to modernize its military. Of course, there's no question, despite all the sort of pieties that sort of are thrown out by diplomats, there's no question that part of that comes from a concern about China's growing capabilities.
Right.
And that is just part of an equation, and I think everyone recognizes that.
Yeah, on that point, Raymond, does the imports from the United States to India, does that change the strategic balance in any way in that region, in South Asia?
Well, I think what's really new here is this co-production idea. It wasn't talked about publicly much in the summit itself, but behind the scenes there's a lot going on about the F-16. As you probably know, that production line is shutting down in the United States. And it has been offered really to India to do co-production in India. This would be a remarkable development, really, because it presents India not just as an arms buyer from outside, but a manufacturer that is integrated in global supply chains for defense production. And it goes back to being able to have a confluence between Make in India Prime Minister Modi's thrust and what Donald Trump wants, America first and jobs here. So if that could be worked out, it seems to me that that is a very significant development. Does it change balances of power? No, I don't think it changes balance of powers, but it's a very significant development.
I would agree that